Ladies and gentlemen, this is huge. Supreme Court, CNN, Supreme Court agrees to decide if mail-ins can arrive after Election Day. NBC News, Supreme Court to weigh imposing new limits on mail-ins. In major case, Politico, Supreme Court decide whether states can count that arrive after. Okay, this is huge. This gives a presidential landslide to J.D. Vance and Republicans in 2028, 2032, until Democrats get their political party back. And it's not a complete dumpster, you know what. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. If support is counted the day of, there's no chance Democrats defeat a Trump Republican. Zero chance. Not on a statewide. We're not talking about congressional districts. They could take back the House in 26. We're talking about on a national presidential contest. A presidential contest. They have no chance in 2028 if this takes place. If the Supreme Court says, yeah, you have to decide. Basically, it has to be what happened in 2024. Paul Bartlett, thank you. To my super chat, thank you. This is huge. The Supreme Court sides with Trump over 93% of the time. There's a reason for that, because President Trump is routinely on the side of the Constitution. If the Supreme Court, according to the Brennan Center, sides with President Trump 93% of the time, and federal courts side with Democrats 80% of the time, and the Supreme Court overrules the rulings of federal judges 93% of the time, well, you do the math on that. The question is why Democrats are consistently on the wrong side of history, consistently engaged in potentially unconstitutional behavior, like trying to kick Trump out of the ballot. That was unanimously overturned in Colorado by the U.S. Supreme Court. Let's take a trip down memory lane. Every single presidential contest, if decided on that day and not 5, 6, 7 weeks later or 3 weeks later, like 5 years ago, will lead to J.D. Vance victory, Marco Rubio victory in 2032. There's nobody. I pray to God they run Zoran Mamdani on a national stage. That would be fantastic. Hit subscribe to my super chat. Thank you. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right after this. Hit subscribe there. Let's do this.
So we mentioned a moment ago we haven't called 3 states. There's a reason for that, Alaska notwithstanding here. This is Michigan, okay? You've got a raw vote total of 91,000. Wayne is the biggest county outstanding, but you've got a lot of the vote in here now, just about 10% still out there. I don't know if she can catch him in Michigan. Let's say she can't. Same for Arizona. I was checking this out here. Raw vote total 104,000. Maricopa's where you get all your votes, 60% of the state. He's got a lead there, right? 2.3 points. Same for Nevada. Here is a 60,000 vote lead. It's almost 5 points. Clark County, Las Vegas, where you get 70% of the total vote statewide. I don't know if she can catch him there. So where does that take us? Let me go ahead and do the path of 270 that we're doing late at night. Dana, I just think right now there's a really good chance once Alaska chips in here, Michigan stays the way it is, Arizona stays the way it is, Nevada stays the way it is. You're at 312. Right. That's an electoral landslide, as they say, okay?
Democrats rely, according to President Trump, definitely not my viewpoint. According to President Trump and J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, and everyone with a functioning brain cell, Democrats rely on support after Election Day. The results should be in that day. That's why it's called. That's why the day is called Election Day. And you'll hear what Rick Scott had to deal with years back. Okay, but nobody was cheating Rick Scott, Senator Rick Scott in Florida. Nobody. So they rely on support that trickles in, and then suddenly, miraculously, you see this in blue cities as well. And you saw this when Biden won more support than any other candidate in the history of this country. And less than 4 years later, he lost all that political capital. I wonder, how did that happen? Because that was pristine. Biden won fair and square. It was completely pristine. 3 weeks after Election Day was completely pristine. Definitely no shenanigans there. So Democrats rely on support after the fact, which is, and then the media says, well, there's nothing wrong. And then all the investigative journalists suddenly stop working. And any whistleblower, anyone that comes and says, hey, I saw this. Oh, and then the entire media says, you didn't see that. Oh, this is Russia.
Okay, very important for Trump to have this. You think about the number of people who consider him a divisive political leader. You get an electoral landslide, you win the national vote in all likelihood, you win more blacks and more Hispanics, and that enables you to govern more effectively.
President Trump almost won the Latino vote nationwide. Democrats can have Zoran Mondani in New York City. That's fine. They should run socialists nationwide. They should really do that if they think it's so moral and just, and see what happens. You'll have J.D. Vance, Rubio. You'll have every Trump Republican winning every 4 years consistently.
Once you go back to D.C. on the 20th of January.
Fascinating. All right, Bill, thank you so much. Well, there's a lot happening in the next several weeks before Trump returns to office. Battleground states will begin certifying election results this month. They want to bring in Carrie Urban and Andy McCarthy. So I also want to get to Trump's legal battles with you guys. So let's take you through the certification of election results real quickly. Just on the dates, November 22nd, November.
So it's really interesting that President Trump on that night won. It's really interesting how we weren't all the states that had all of these, all of these pieces of paper, let's just use for the algorithm. I mean, thank God you can actually speak your mind nowadays. But let's just, all these pieces of paper coming in weeks, days after. Gee, Pennsylvania, Arizona, we found out Trump won that night in November of 24. How did that happen? How did that happen? Oh, that's right. Nobody wanted to be audited when President Trump wins. Okay. Nobody wanted to get the heat politically or possible criminal probes. So things were done correctly, and Trump won in a landslide. They elect Zoran Mondani or AOC, and I was, of course, a big Bernie Sanders person back in the day. I was the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post in 2015, and that's embarrassing for both me and Bernie Sanders or anyone who supports him. But he was cheated, and they said no, they did nothing, and then they blamed Russia for all of their problems for the past 10 years. But the issue is, ladies and gentlemen, they can't win on a national, they can't win a presidential contest with the candidates they have, okay? Because at the end of the day, Zoran Mondani, Bernie Sanders, they're all part of the same system, the same Democratic machine. Biden won over 14 million votes. Were all of these people disenfranchised when Harris, who won no votes, became the nominee? So they used the word disenfranchised when these people were not allowed to see the candidate that they wanted. So, the Supreme Court's going to disenfranchise people. Well, did the Democratic Party, did the Democratic primary disenfranchise 14 million Democrats? So they go back and forth. There's no set value system. Let's continue.
Can now project that former President Donald Trump will win the state of North Carolina. This has been a contested state. Vice President Harris went there many, many times. Democratic governor in the state of North Carolina. You saw former President Trump go there a number of times, about 4 times in the past 2 weeks to campaign. The campaign always felt that they were in good position in North Carolina. Now we can project that he will win the state of North Carolina and its 16 electoral votes. The Fox News decision desk can now also predict that Vice President Harris will win New Mexico. That was a tight race. It had tightened in recent days, but Vice President Harris will win New Mexico. So as we look at the race to 270, the electoral votes needed, it now stands at 232 for former President Trump and 198 for Vice President Harris.
That makes North Carolina the state in the battlegrounds that Trump has won 3 times. It was the only battleground state that he locked down in 2020. So obviously a relief at the Trump campaign that he has kept that one in his column as well tonight as we continue to move on.
What happened?
News can now project that the state of Georgia will go to former President Donald Trump. This was a really hard-fought battle. If you think about Georgia, loses it last time to President Biden by 11,779 votes. For some reason, that number sticks in my mind. And this is a big win. He went there, campaigned there, and so did Vice President Harris numerous times, thinking that Georgia could stay in the Democratic column.
You know, he had a difficult relationship with Governor Brian Kemp. If you remember, 4 years ago, after losing Georgia, they tried to salvage 2 Senate Trump, who is in a very good position to be the next president.
Your great hats on.
I saw someone with a
front,
really large
back.
one. Yeah.
As we look now at what we...
So the Supreme Court is going to ask, why was Pennsylvania decided that night in 2024? And why did it take weeks 5 years earlier, 4 years earlier? Okay, right here. And of course, you have articles. Well, this is why France counts 35 million votes in one day or one evening. Oh, they have only one time zone and all this stuff. Okay, great article. 35 million. We have 158 million. Okay, great. Start counting. Start counting 2-3 days prior, with all the votes that you have prior. This isn't rocket science. There's a zero reason. You can have so many things go wrong from a criminal sense, unethical, deceitful things that take place. I'm not going to use the word, but it starts. The two letters are C and H. And you don't need, the Supreme Court is not going to say, oh, yeah, well, other countries can count and decide that night, oh, we just decided Pennsylvania in 24. Oh, we'll give the Democrats the ability to just count 3 weeks after. I mean, the Founding Fathers would laugh. They would laugh if that type of obvious corruption were allowed.
Have Pennsylvania. Is this a call, ladies and gentlemen? We are now projecting that Donald J. Trump will win the state of Pennsylvania. Former President Donald J. Trump will win the state of Pennsylvania, and thereby he is on his way to becoming the 47th president of the United States. With this, the path for Vice President Harris has narrowed, and there's really no path going forward. It's vanished. This is historic. Everything was about Pennsylvania. Everything from the beginning was about Pennsylvania. Now, former President Trump will win the state of Pennsylvania, and we can make that call, the 19 electoral votes. That puts him at 267, not officially over the 270, but the path that it takes to get to 270, he is well on his way to becoming the 47th president of the United States in what is going to be the biggest political phoenix from the ashes story that we have ever seen, ever. I mean, I'm going to say it's more than Grover Cleveland in
1892.
Yeah, 1892.
I don't think that Grover Cleveland was not the subject of a Russia investigation, 2 impeachments, 2 assassination attempts. Indictments. They have indictments, 91 indictments.
They couldn't stop him with all of that. 91 indictments, and not one article in the Associated Press or New York Times or Washington Post stating that Democrats were going after, with animus and political bias, their political opponents. 91 criminal indictments. And not one Democrat or wonderful, morally superior, highly educated, liberal or progressive stated, oh, they're going after the direct political rival. They're going after political retribution for Trump having defeated Clinton. And not one person cared that they recreated a new Cold War. But when Trump says, hey, you committed crimes going after me, which they did, oh my God, it's political retribution. It's retribution. They go from the rule of law, trying to imprison Trump during an election year, to, oh, it's retribution, oh, political partisanship. They say the same exact thing as President Trump when it suits them. When they don't like the results of a presidential or congressional contest, oh, yeah, you took it, you stole it. They say the same things, and then when Trump says it, oh my God.
Convictions, and there is almost nothing that hasn't been thrown at this former president, and his tenacity in wanting to go back and run again, which he announced immediately after he lost in 2020. This is a huge historic moment in the United States of America as the former President Trump is closing in with just a few electoral votes away now from clinching 270 as Pennsylvania is called for Donald Trump.
We're looking live, 1:21 a.m. in the morning at Trump headquarters. The cheers coming up. We're told the former president is there, as well as J.D. Vance, Senator J.D. Vance. They are getting ready to hear from former President Donald Trump. Again, at 267, not there yet, but looking at where that vote is in Wisconsin, where the vote is in Michigan, where the vote is in Nevada and in Arizona. There is no path, Brit Hume, for Vice President Harris, and just 30,000 feet. What this means.
Well, I'm old enough to remember when Richard Nixon was declared dead in 1962. Remember the famous speech he said, "You don't have Nixon to kick around anymore." No one could imagine after that failed race for governor that he could have come back in 1968 and been elected president. That was a hell of a comeback. This, to my eye, was a man who was faced with many more slings and arrows than Nixon had been at that time, hated though he was by the Democrats. This surmounts that. This is an extraordinary comeback.
The Fox News decision desk can now officially project that Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
Thank the Lord. And it all happened that night. And you have to ask yourself, how did Pennsylvania, Arizona, all of these places that Biden and Democrats had to wait until the next day, next 2 weeks after, to solidify, to cement Biden's presidency after, 3.5 years before he was kicked to the curb politically by George Clooney and Democrats. The Democrats will have you believe, or media would have you believe, complete nonsense that there's zero corruption. Well, there's zero corruption. I mean, you have places that run out of electricity in Arizona. I'm not gonna. It's happened like time after time, and it's a complete coincidence. I mean, they would never allow, and it just happens to be the geographic locations where Republicans are strongest in. And suddenly the power stops working. And it's like, how can you see what happens is the typical Democratic Party scandal is so outlandish that you can't, there's no rebuttal to where's the evidence. So when Clinton said, I used servers for yoga, the rebuttal, how can you prove she didn't? Well, there was classified data also. Well, but she said yoga. And it's like, well, how can you prove that anyone turned the power off? It's like, well, but it happened numerous times. It happened year after year in places in Phoenix where Republicans vote. So it's like these are outlandish things that take place. Oh, and during the Mueller probe, the cell phones for all the agents that despise Trump, the cell phones were reset and all of the data was erased. Well, it was reported by all the outlets as just having been erased accidentally because, you know, it was factory reset. It happens usually. Nobody's ever suspicious. These are completely outlandish things that take place that obviously benefit one political side. And then Trump calls it out and he's a monster.
States.
The former president's comeback will be complete with a win in Wisconsin, a state that he narrowly lost 4 years ago. He is now the second president in U.S. history to win non-consecutive terms. The first was Grover Cleveland in the late 1800s. Senator J.D. Vance will become the 50th vice president of the United States. Voters express deep frustration with the Biden administration, and former President Trump and the future President Trump overperformed in urban areas, particularly with men, proving that the strategy that they doubled and tripled down on over the course of the last few months absolutely succeeded and brought him back to the White House.
47th president of the United States, former President Trump now defeats Vice President Kamala Harris, who entered this race just over 100.
How many Democratic primary votes did Harris win? Were 14 million voters disenfranchised? So they use words like disenfranchised. See, here's the thing. The modern day, President Trump's GOP believes in specific policies, a specific foreign policy goals and objectives. They want to enforce immigration laws. They want to limit endless wars, and they want tariffs to use as a leverage to ensure that manufacturing jobs are brought back into the U.S. and to ensure that things aren't outsourced and the working class benefits. Okay, so when Democrats say social safety nets, like, oh yeah, Trump is ensuring with his economic policy, bringing manufacturing jobs back, for example, that people don't need social safety. Democrats never ask, well, why do people need social safety nets? Because of outsourcing, which is what Trump is trying to tackle. Now, Democrats have Zoran Mamdani, and then they have Chuck Schumer. Completely different ideologies. The only similarity is government spending, but completely different viewpoint. Democrats are all over the place. So the quest for political power is so obvious. They don't even have functioning primaries. And then they pontificate about democracy. Biden should have been the nominee. He won his primary. And when they use the word disenfranchise, oh, the Supreme Court's going to... Well, if the Supreme Court is going to disenfranchise anyone by making sure that states count every vote before to ensure count everything before the end of election day night, okay, before the end of that night, before election day, by the end of election day, every single vote has to be counted. So if the Supreme Court, which they will almost certainly rule, because it's so obvious, so many things could take place after election day, which is exactly, almost certainly, according to President Trump, definitely not me, what Democrats want. So they can miraculously, in an awesome, amazing, stupendous way, come back and victorious. But the problem is when the Supreme Court does back Trump, like it's backed Trump over 93% of the time, and says, yeah, you got to make sure the victorious presidential candidate is decided that evening, so we don't have to go through what we went through with Biden and Trump. That's going to destroy the Democratic Party marketing, let's just say marketing edge. Because once it goes past election day, you have media saying everything's fine. And then you have people coming out and saying, I'm seeing things that are nuts. And then you have all the nothing, it didn't happen. Oh my God, it didn't happen. This, and it's like, the Democrats are all over the place. They don't even have functioning primaries. And then you have people coming out and saying, I'm seeing things that are nuts. And then you have all the nothing, it didn't happen. Oh my God, it didn't happen. This, and it's like, the Democrats are all over the place. They don't even have functioning primaries. And then you have people coming out and saying, I'm seeing things that are nuts. And then you have all the nothing, it didn't happen. Oh my God, it didn't happen. This, and it's like, it's like you can look back at certain events and say that is just not the way things are done. That's not the way things are done. Even if specific allegations were proven false, it's these bizarre occurrences lend themselves to doubt, which is what Democrats cast when they lose and are completely indignant when that emotion is leveled at them. But let's continue.
100 days ago, and for Democrats, they were projecting the possibility.
I'm speaking in a roundabout way, in a very broad, ambiguous manner, because, you know, I'm like still traumatized from the algorithm of 5 years ago.
Of running the table with battleground states. David Plouffe with the Democratic campaign of Harris campaign suggested that just yesterday. Now it is possible that Donald Trump runs the table with these states and builds on a big landslide electoral win.
Hi, I'm Ed.
Popular vote is going to finish out, but we do know that he will be going back to the White House, and with him, Brit Hume, will be a lot of changes because he will have been there once and will know what he wants to do.
You know, he often accounts for the fact that he had so much turnover in his first term, in his term as president, by the fact that he really know Washington, and he was new to this realm that he had come to win the presidency.
It has won 2 non-consecutive terms.
It has been one of the greatest political comebacks of all modern history. Donald Trump securing more than 270 electoral votes, we are projecting.
For all of those people who disown friends and family, for all of the wonderful, highly educated, morally superior friends and family who are beautiful people, there are a lot of beautiful people, really, and I mean this, special people in my heart, beautiful people in my heart who disowned me, essentially, because I supported Trump. He was a 2-term president who just won in a landslide, okay? The people who support President Trump are on not only the side of history. We had 4 years of Biden. So the rebuttal was, you're supporting a madman, a tyrant, a despot. Well, we had 4 years of Biden. He was supposed to save us from this madman, this tyrant, this despot. We went back to President Trump. The country went back to President Trump. Why did you disown friends and family? Was it worth it? All of that wisdom that both people could have shared, all that happiness, all of that, the good times you could have had with a person, because I can't be your friend anymore, you voted Trump. He was voted back in office. We had 4 years of a terrible presidency. Biden was so horrible that even George Clooney said, he needs to get out. The Democrats themselves kicked Biden out of office. Was it worth disowning friends and family, ruining relationships? Was politics really worth all of that? No. I grew up, you never talk about politics, money, or religion. That flew out the window with politics. And every attempt at bullying and intimidating and the coercion, the attempt to shun people, it didn't work. President Trump won again, and Zoran Mamdani is mayor of New York, which is actually the best thing possible. God bless him. Wish him only I love New York. Wish New Yorkers only the best. I hope that they go on a national stage and Zoran becomes the Democratic nominee. But if Hillary Clinton becomes the Democratic nominee after being indicted, which she will be almost certainly, 99.9% chance, Zoran will still vote for her. Anyway, that's the way Democrats roll. The point is, why, if Trump won again after 4 years of a failed Democratic presidency, did morally superior Democrats disown friends and family? That's the question.
Flipping battlegrounds of Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Wisconsin red, and defending North Carolina.
So it's an incredible result after an unprecedented election cycle.
GNS 1 and 11. Thank you so very much. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you.
Filled with twists and turns, including 2 assassination attempts.
And that's not to mention 2 impeachments, the legal battles, and days spent in courtrooms instead of on the campaign trail. And despite efforts from the mainstream media and Democrat elites to write him off, Trump is projected to be the 47th president of the United States. He addressed his supporters earlier this morning.
I will be fighting for you, and with every breath in my body.
And let me give you the Bernie Sanders. I will be not fighting for you, and definitely not accepting that I lost or that I was cheated. Definitely not acknowledging that Debbie and Hillary cheated me. And I will definitely not be fighting for you. And by the way, your money will be used to purchase a Steele dossier. How you like them apples?
I will not rest until we have delivered the strong, safe, and prosperous America that our children deserve and that you deserve. This will truly be the golden age of America. I want to also thank my beautiful wife, Melania, First Lady. Who has the #1 best-selling book in the country. Can you believe that? Oh, no, she's done a great job. Works very hard to help people. Now I can say Vice President-elect of the United States, J.D. Vance. He's turned out to be a good choice. I took a little heat at the beginning, but he was, I knew the brain was a good one.
Well, Mr. President, I appreciate you allowing me to join you on this incredible journey. I thank you for the trust that you placed in me. And I think that we just witnessed the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States of America.
This is every 4 years when the Supreme Court says, yeah, you got to count them all by Election Day. That's every 4 years. Okay, Democrats, like I said, they don't have anything on a national. They can win Virginia. Virginia Democratic Party is very powerful. Okay, Washington, D.C., it's a very powerful Democratic Party. And New Jersey, historically, well, in modern history, is a blue state. So, and Trump almost won there. He was like 5-6 points away from winning. On the congressional or state level, yeah, Democrats can still win. Nationally, you can forget about it, especially when the Supreme Court says, hey, you got to count them all that night. You're going to get every 4 years this replay because Democrats don't have any. They cannot run a centrist Democrat when Zoran Mamdani gives the Democratic Party all the electricity and energy. Zoran Mamdani is a younger Bernie Sanders that they didn't cheat. Even more way like actual socialist. Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist. He's more of an actual socialist, possibly, I'm not saying communist, but that type of mentality. Okay? The government is the answer to everything. The government is the answer to everything. That's the mentality. You can't run a national presidential election. Democrats cannot possibly win, especially if the votes have to be counted that day, if their political party has people like Chuck Schumer and Zoran Mamdani. It makes no sense. So do they pick the socialist nationally?
This will forever be remembered as the day the American people regained control of their country.
Wow. It's hard to put all this in perspective, but there's other major stories this morning. Republicans are set to regain control of the Senate, perhaps in a big way, ending a 4-year stretch in the minority after flipping an Ohio seat red. We have live team coverage on the historic morning. Madeline Rivera will give us an update on all the Senate races, and a huge win for Republicans, and many on the precipice of doing just that. Kevin Corke has the key issues on the ballot in different states. But first, Lucas Tomlinson is live at the White House with Trump's path to victory. Lucas.
Well, good morning, Brian. As Stephen J.D. Vance said adroitly, this has to be considered the greatest political comeback in history. We knew who would win. The battleground states would win this election. And, of course, it all started with Pennsylvania. Whoever won Pennsylvania, no doubt, was going to win the race. The race was called in Pennsylvania.
Again, Pennsylvania was called that night. There's zero rebuttal to that. Pennsylvania was called that night. And Democrats, 5 years earlier said, you know what, you will stop existing if you, go out and I don't even want to get into it. Okay, they took advantage of fear. They took advantage in the most disgusting, insidious way of fear. But people voted in person during the Democratic primary. Remember that. Just remember that. In 2020, they voted in person. In the rain. There were like hailstorms. Okay. People voted in person for Biden in the Democratic primary. But November of that year, oh my God. And then all the support flowed in, weeks later. So we can call it that night. And the Supreme Court's going to say, well, France can do it. Pennsylvania did it in 2024. No. We have the tech now. We can go to the moon. If you can go to the moon, you can count. And most of it was electronic anyway. So you can count that night. You can count it that night just like Pennsylvania. So the Supreme Court's going to say Pennsylvania was counted in 2024 that night. France is able to do it. There's too many question marks. And we'll get to Rick Scott in a second. This is what Rick Scott had to deal with 6 years ago. Check this out.
Now from Naples, Florida, Governor Scott, who thought he won election to the Senate Tuesday night. We also invited his opponent, Senator Nelson, but he declined. Governor, at 11 p.m. on election night, your lead was 56,000 votes. But as of the latest tally by the state, your lead is now down to 12,500.
So this is the theme song the Democrats play. Dun, 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 we're coming back. Dun, 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 dun. Whoa! We have new support. We're finding new support. Oh my God, it's amazing. Look at all this wonderful support that we find. Oh, you're mocking the possible disenfranchisement of 14 million people voted for Biden, so spare me that nonsense. And there was no Democratic primary that functioned ever, or the past 10 years. That's what they have this theme song. We're coming back, and they play like whatever theme song, and it's like, wait a second, how did you go from? And it isn't interesting. It's never the Republican really. It's always the Democrat that comes back. How does that happen? I'm not stating that any foul play. I think it's definitely statistically possible that every single time the Democrat comes back to be victorious or close, every single time that the support is counted after the day, every single time, it's always of course, it's normal. No problem at all.
Or, as Phil pointed out, 0.15% over Bill Nelson. How do you feel about the recount, and how do you feel about your chances of winning?
Well, we had 8 million people vote. Chuck Schumer spent over $50 million trying to beat me, but we won. Every supervisor election has reported their results. I'm up about, I think, 12,500 votes. There's never been a recount that's changed in Florida or any other state, any sort of win like that. So while we're going through the recount, we won. The citizens of the state won. I'm going to be going to D.C., and I'm going to do exactly what I did in Florida, try to change the direction of the country like we tried to change the direction of Florida.
You suggested earlier this week that there was rampant fraud, your phrase going on here. Let's take a look at what you had to say.
No ragtag group of liberal activists or lawyers from D.C. will be allowed to steal this election.
Governor, do you have any hard evidence that there was actual fraud or is actual fraud going on? And if so, by whom?
Sure. So, Chris, we have very specific election laws in the state to try to prevent fraud. We had to go to court to force the supervisor elections in Palm Beach County and Broward County to comply with the law, which is the law is there to prevent fraud. They were not letting party officials review, when they were reviewing ballots. They didn't report on time. We still don't understand how they went in these two counties and had dramatically increased. Another 93,000 votes were cast, or somehow they came up with 93,000 votes after election night. We still don't know how they came up with that. So
these things are not statistically possible. And if the rebuttal is, well, these votes are always counted in the regions where that benefit, well, how come the support for Democratic areas isn't counted prior? And so the issue is everyone has to play by the same rules. Why is it always, and we're talking statewide, we're talking Eric Adams almost lost. This is Eric Adams almost lost the years back in New York City. We're talking the Democrats do this to their own candidates too.
We're trying to figure out exactly what happened. I've asked the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to go in and do an investigation to find out what happened here. But we clearly know the judges have already said they clearly violated the law.
I agree with you. There were two decisions, one in Broward County and one in Palm Beach County, which both said that the election supervisors there did not comply with transparency in making information available. On the other hand, as you point out, you asked the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to investigate any accusations of wrongdoing, but the department says so far they've done nothing because they have no specific allegations of fraud, and the Secretary of State's office says the same thing. So
it is literally impossible to acquire the moment a specific criminal act takes place when you're dealing with like a very easily manipulated scenario. So what's his name here will say, and then Democrats will say, well, where's the criminal act? It's like, well, but there's no FBI investigation. There's no people testifying under oath. There's no actual criminal investigation. So numerous foul play could take place. They're finding boxes. They're finding all these things. And it's always chalked up to, well, that's a coincidence. Well, you can't prove anyone committed a crime. Yeah, you can't. Even when you can prove a statistical impossibility, it's still, you don't know exactly. The Democrats or media will say, well, how did it happen? If you don't know how it happened, there's no crime.
Certainly they were not as transparent as they should be, and that had to be remedied by the courts, but there are no allegations of fraud at this point.
Well, first off, the laws are set up to stop fraud. That's what the laws are set up to do. And let's look at what happened yesterday. We know Senator Nelson's lawyer said that a non-citizen should have the right to vote. Senator Nelson has gone to court to say that fraudulent ballots that were not properly delivered, signed, whatever, should be counted. Okay, Senator Nelson is clearly trying to commit fraud to try to win this election. That's all this is.
Wait a second. I want to pick up on that. You're accusing Bill Nelson of trying to commit fraud?
So Chris Wallace and others, Democrats, media, if you're moving boxes in the middle of the night, you put boxes in a truck, you move them. Is that a crime? Okay, there you go. That's the problem with counting after Election Day.
His lawyer said that a non-citizen should vote. That's one. Number two, he's gone to trial and said that fraudulent ballots should be counted. Ballots have already been thrown out because they were not done properly. He said those should be counted.
And you think that is the senator himself is committing fraud?
Well, it's his team.
I want to play a clip from Senator Nelson. He issued a video yesterday. Let's take a look at that.
Votes are not being found, they're being counted.
He says this is just a matter of allowing the democratic process.
They're not being found, but over 100% of them are liberal Democrats.
in Florida to continue. Your reaction to that, Governor?
Chris, 93,000 ballots were found after election night. It's the law. You have to say how many votes have been cast that night. Okay, within 30 minutes after election. Okay, somehow after the election finished, somehow they came up with 93,000 votes afterwards. How did they, Chris? How did they do it? We don't know. Bill Nelson's a sore loser. He's been in politics way too long, 42 years. He just won't give up, and he's saying, if you're not a citizen, your vote ought to count. He's saying that fraudulent ballots ought to count. That's wrong.
I want to turn the subject slightly with you about this because the election supervisor in Broward County, a woman named Brenda Snipes, has a history of irregularities. And in fact, 2 years ago, a judge ruled that she illegally destroyed ballots from a Democratic primary. The question I have for you is, as governor, you could have suspended her at some point and named a replacement. Why didn't you?
Well, what I'm focused on now is we've gone through an election. Let's get this election finished. That's what I'm focused on now. Let's get this election finished. Let's make sure she complies with the law. Let's make sure that Florida Department of Law Enforcement does an investigation. I've asked all the sheriffs who have the authority to do this to be very vigilant with this. We have 7,500 volunteers willing to go in. But look, Bill Nelson's a sore loser. We've won. We have had to win this election twice now. I will be going to Washington as the next U.S. Senator from Florida, and I'm going to work hard to change the direction of this country like we did in Florida.
You got to know that people across the country are saying Florida, again, recounting controversies, bad ballot design. You were governor for 8 years. Could you have done more to reform the election system than you did?
Well, you know, Chris, we have laws, right, that try to prevent fraud, to try to make sure people feel like, you know, there's an honest election here. It's so frustrating when you see supervisor elections that violate the law. That's what, not just what I'm saying, what judges are saying. You know, we have a reason that we have party officials be able to review ballots. We have a reason that we report information to prevent fraud. I mean, the supervisor in Broward has admitted ballots that shouldn't have been cast in this election got put together with other ballots. So we know they're doing the wrong thing. We're trying to do everything we can to prevent fraud, but these individuals, you know, we've had to go to court to try to get them to comply with the law. We can pass every law you want, but if people don't comply with it, what else can you do?
I got one final question for you, Governor. You've said a couple of times you're the new senator, you're headed to Washington, you're going to change things. Specifically, the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has scheduled a photo op for 2 days from now, for Tuesday. I think it's at 10 a.m., a photo op where he'll take pictures with all of the new coming Republican senators. Are you going to be there?
I haven't decided where I'm going to be this week. You know, we're going to watch this manual machine recount process. So I'll figure that out in the next few days. But
so these are all like statistical anomalies, okay? That even 90,000, and then 85, 90% of them are Democrat. These are like statistical anomalies. Even if the response is, well, they come from Democratic areas. I'm like, yeah, but 80%, 90%, these are statistical anomalies. Again, if the reverse were true and Republicans were coming back after Election Day, you better believe Democrats would accuse Republicans of cheating. They did so in 2000. Okay, they haven't. To this day, they don't accept 2000. And Bush, almost certainly, there were shenanigans there.
All right, earlier tonight, Governor Rick Scott filed a lawsuit against Palm Beach and Broward counties for lack of access to public records regarding voting numbers. This comes as a recount now looms over his race for the U.S. Senate. Joining us now, the man himself, Governor Rick Scott. Governor, I'm looking at these numbers. On Election Day, you were up 57,000 votes. What is the number now?
Now it's down to 15,000 votes. So it's clear. We got some left-wing activists. We've got some Democrat D.C. lawyers. They're down here for one purpose, to steal this election. Somehow, Governor, Broward County supervisor.
I looked at the numbers. You were told 5 different numbers Florida law says that all absentee early voting numbers must be reported within 30 minutes of the polls closing, correct?
Absolutely.
And those numbers
Sean,
have
they found
gone
78,000 votes. Sean, they've found 78,000 new votes since Election Day 2 days ago in Broward County, and 15,000 more votes in Palm Beach. We don't know how many more votes they're going to come up with, but it sure appears they're going to keep finding as many votes as it takes to try to win this election.
Right.
So I've asked the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to immediately do an investigation. We filed lawsuits. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win.
Well, she, in 2016, her office posted results a half hour before the polls closed. That's an election violation law, but broken. She was sued for leaving amendments off the ballots. She also, in the case of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, why is this person even working there?
Well, what I've done is I've asked for an investigation, but we have examples. The Palm Beach supervisor won't allow normal party officials that are supposed to be reviewing ballots. They're not allowing them to do it properly. That's a violation of the law. They were supposed to report all these results. They're not. But how did they come up with 78,000 more votes?
And that won't be able to take place when the Supreme Court backs President Trump and Republicans like Rick Scott and anyone with a functioning brain cell. The Supreme Court is going to ensure that nationwide, almost certainly, that everything is counted that night. Just like Pennsylvania was in 2024, just like France does, 35 million in one night. Okay, it's not rocket science. We can go to the moon. It's not rocket science. So this is if you're new, hit subscribe to this channel. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right after this. We will have a synopsis of this segment on H.A. Goodman's other channel. It's an upload. So be there in about 30 seconds after we end this live stream. But ladies and gentlemen, this cannot continue to take place. You cannot have suddenly the Democrat comes up and it's always the same thing. An absurd amount of support is found. A statistical anomaly takes place. And suddenly it's a dead heat. They're tied. And then the Democrat wins. And it's like nobody believes that. That's not even statistically possible. But let's continue.
Just in Broward and 15 in Palm Beach, no other county is having these problems. We had a horrible hurricane in the Panhandle. It didn't happen there. The lawyers that come down said they're here to win the election, not here to say, oh, I want to find out what the results are and make sure there's fair results. They're down here for one purpose, and they've said that, to win the election.
27 days ago, the Panhandle was smashed with one of the worst hurricanes we've seen. They got their votes in on time. They ended up doing this. To me, this is the single biggest abuse of power in an election I've seen. And they have Mark Elias, the guy at the heart of the whole Perkins Coie, Fusion GPS, Clinton bought and paid for dossier leading the way.
Yep. I mean, they're down here. He's down here for one purpose, steal this election. And he said he's down here to win this election. He doesn't care about anything else.
He's down there to win it.
So we won. Yeah, we won. I'm going to be the U.S. Senator. I'm going to fight this all the way. We're going to do everything we can. We're looking at every legal remedy we can exercise. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win this. This is
and
wrong
every
what
other
they're
county.
doing.
So another reason the Supreme Court will not allow Democrats or Republicans to count votes after Election Day is because it is a green light for absolute chaos and mayhem, which when media is firmly, pushing the Democratic Party narrative 24/7. If you have chaos and mayhem and media continually states, hey, don't believe your lying eyes. That's not true. Everything's fine. Here's a fact check. The 50,000th fact check trying to justify something that's a statistical anomaly. You have absolute chaos. And, people don't trust the process, the outcome. So that's another reason the Supreme Court will not allow support to be counted after that night. So anyway, let's continue. Thank God Scott won.
Except Broward and Palm Beach did it the right way. Every other county, and they've done this before, and why does she still have a job?
Well, she's separately elected in these counties. And but think about it. Some of these other supervisors that did it the right way are Democrats also. So every other county, Republican or Democrat, those supervisors did it the right way. These two didn't. They have violated the law. We're going. I've asked the Florida law enforcement to do an investigation, and we've already filed a lawsuit. We're going to make sure we win this. I won this election for the benefit of the people of this state. Their will is not going to be thwarted.
I've never seen anything like this in my life. It is obviously corrupt. Obviously, laws were broken. Obviously, there are shenanigans here. I believe you and Senator Rubio are 100% correct. We will follow this every single second of every day now because the people of Florida deserve their just vote, which they got. And you won this race hands down. And this is a disgrace that they get to do this election in, election out. Somebody needs to go to jail here.
So again, when Democrats say, well, the Supreme Court's going to disenfranchise people, they're going to disenfranchise voters who don't get their votes counted, their own primary had 14,465,519 people who were disenfranchised. The Democratic primary had that number of people disenfranchised. They voted for Joe Biden. And if the response was, well, you know what, it's the Democratic Party, we could do our own thing. Okay, what if it was Zohran Mamdani that won? And then Joe Biden became the nominee because George Clooney wrote an article that said Zohran Mamdani can't win nationally, so we need a different nominee. It's the same thing. They don't care about disenfranchising anyone. Almost certainly it's about taking a certain victory from Republicans or a Trump Republican, let's say with Rick Scott, and a certain victory, and stating, hey, there's still support to be counted. We still have support to be counted. And then with a statistical anomaly, 80 to 90% of the outstanding support counted for the Democrat. So again, it has nothing to do with being disenfranchised, because almost 14.5 million people were disenfranchised voting for Biden in their primary. It has to do with chaos, mayhem after Election Day, which has to be stopped. And the Supreme Court understands this. They don't want more work. If you think this is nonsense and, you're just speculating, you think the Supreme Court wants every 4 years to be in the limelight, in the spotlight? Oh, they have to decide Pennsylvania yet again every 4 years. No, they want less work, not more work. They don't want to have to decide things that should be decided that night. So they're going to side with Trump. It's going to be a huge defeat for them. Oh my God, they're going to talk about disenfranchising. Oh, and you can always go back to the 14.5 million people who were disenfranchised in the Democratic primary. And Joe Biden won his primary. He won. He won his primary. He should have been the nominee. Harris got 0 votes. And again, if the rebuttal is, well, it's our business. Okay, what if you did that to Zohran Mamdani? There would be a complete revolt within your political party. And you did it to Bernie Sanders, nothing happened, so maybe not. But anyway, hit subscribe to this channel. This is huge. This is really U.S., all of it's U.S. history. But this is a landmark victory for Trump. Incoming, imminent. Hit subscribe to this channel. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel right now. This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. Go to H.A. Goodman's other channel for the upload right now to my